There is someone in your life who has never once said, "I'm sorry," and meant it. You know exactly who just came to mind. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's an ex, maybe it's someone you work with every single day. And the strangest part, they don't seem bothered by it at all. While you're lying awake replaying the argument, they slept fine. While you were trying to figure out what went wrong, they had already moved on, like it never happened. Here's what psychology has actually discovered about these people. It is not what you think. It is not arrogance. It is not selfishness. What's happening inside their mind is something far more disturbing and far more common than either of those explanations. By the end of this, you won't just understand them, you'll understand why you kept trying to get an apology that was never coming. Think about the last time someone hurt you and refused to acknowledge it. Not just refused, they flipped it. Suddenly you were the problem. Suddenly you were too sensitive. Suddenly the conversation you started about their behavior became a conversation about your flaws. You walked away more confused than when you started, wondering if you were the one who needed to apologize. That experience has a name in psychology. It's called DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And it's not random. It's not accidental. It is a psychological defense mechanism so deeply wired into certain people that they don't even know they're doing it. Psychologist Jennifer Freyd first documented this pattern in the 1990s, studying abuse survivors and their abusers. What she found shocked her. The people who caused harm weren't just refusing to apologize. Their brains were actively rewriting what happened. Not lying, rewriting. And that distinction changes everything. Here's the first thing you need to understand. For most people, doing something wrong activates guilt. Guilt feels terrible, so we apologize to relieve it. The apology isn't entirely for the other person, it's partly to make ourselves feel better. That's normal, that's healthy. But what happens when guilt doesn't activate? Researchers at the University of Queensland ran a study in 2016 asking participants to behave unethically and then measuring their psychological response. Most people felt guilt. They wanted to make it right. But a specific subset felt something completely different. They felt a sense of power, control. The refusal to apologize wasn't painful for them. It was satisfying. That finding should stop you cold. Because it means for some people, the apology you're waiting for would actually cost them something they're not willing to give up. It's not that they can't find the words, it's that apologizing would require them to feel small, and their entire psychological system is built to prevent that feeling at any cost. Now here's where it gets more complicated. There are actually 3 distinct psychological profiles hiding inside the label "people who never apologize." And you need to know which one you're dealing with, because each one works differently and each one affects you differently. The first profile is what researchers call the ego-protective non-apologizer. These people have what psychology terms fragile high self-esteem. On the surface, they seem confident, sometimes arrogant, but underneath, their sense of self-worth is extremely brittle. One genuine admission of fault could shatter the image they've built, so their brain protects them automatically, reclassifying their harmful actions as justified, necessary, or caused by someone else. A 2014 study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that people with this profile don't just refuse to apologize, they genuinely remember events differently than other people in the room. Their brain edits the footage. Think about what that means for every argument you've ever had with someone like this. You weren't both remembering the same thing differently. You were remembering reality, and they were remembering a version their mind produced to protect them. The second profile is darker, the shame-based non-apologizer. Shame and guilt are not the same emotion, even though most people use the words interchangeably. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am something bad. Researcher Jennifer Brown spent decades studying this distinction and found something critical. Guilt leads to repair. Shame leads to hiding, attacking, or escaping. People who grew up in environments where mistakes were treated as character flaws, where being wrong meant being worthless, learned that an apology is not a path to forgiveness. It's a confession that gets used against them. So they never confess, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. Here's your first pause, because what you just learned means some of the coldest, most unapologetic people you've known were not made of stone, they were made of old wounds. That doesn't excuse the damage they caused you, but it explains why no amount of logic, patience, or confrontation ever worked. Now, the third profile. This one is the one people find hardest to accept. The strategic non-apologizer. This person understands perfectly well what they did. They know you're hurt, and they have made a calculated decision that apologizing would shift the power dynamic in a way they're not willing to allow. Psychologists who study interpersonal dominance, including work out of UC Berkeley's social psychology lab, have found that in high-conflict relationships, the person who apologizes first is unconsciously perceived as lower status by both parties. The strategic non-apologizer has internalized this. Consciously or not, they've learned that withholding accountability is a form of control. And the more you chase the apology, the more control they accumulate. This is why you felt crazy around certain people, not because you are crazy, but because you were playing a game of emotional connection while they were playing a game of dominance, and you didn't know those were two different games. Picture a manager at work who makes a decision that embarrasses one of their employees publicly. The employee brings it up privately, carefully, respectfully. The manager responds by listing everything the employee has done wrong in the last 6 months. By the end of the conversation, the employee is apologizing to the manager. This happens in workplaces across the country every single day. That manager is likely profile 1 or 3. Their brain experienced the conversation as an attack on their authority and responded accordingly. Now picture a mother and an adult daughter. The daughter tries to talk about something painful from her childhood. The mother cries. The mother talks about how hard she worked. The mother talks about her own difficult upbringing. The daughter ends up comforting the mother, the person who caused the original pain. That mother is almost certainly profile 2. The attempt at accountability triggered a shame response so overwhelming that it consumed the entire conversation and left the daughter holding everyone's emotions except her own. Now picture a romantic relationship. One partner does something that clearly crosses a line. When confronted, they say things like, "You're always so dramatic," or "Here we go again," or "I don't even know why I bother." The other partner, desperate to restore peace, backs down. The incident is never addressed. It happens again and again. Each cycle, the person who never apologizes becomes slightly bolder. Each cycle, the person waiting for the apology becomes slightly smaller. These are not extreme or unusual situations. These are Tuesday. Here is what all 3 profiles have in common. They are all, in different ways, people who never learned that you can survive being wrong, that accountability doesn't destroy you, that saying, "I hurt you and I'm sorry," is actually an act of strength, not weakness. Somewhere along the way, through their wiring, their wounds, or their choices, they concluded that self-protection matters more than connection. And they'll keep concluding that until something changes, which, statistically, without intervention, therapy, crisis, consequence, rarely happens. So here's the hardest truth psychology gives us about people who never apologize. The apology you deserve is real. You are right to want it, but waiting for it from someone psychologically incapable or unwilling to give it is not patience, it is self-punishment.
The most important shift isn't understanding them, it's understanding why you kept needing them to be different than they are. That's the question worth sitting with. And here's the one I want you to answer in the comments. Think about the person who came to mind at the very beginning of this video. Based on what you just learned, which of the 3 profiles do you think they are? Because I have a feeling the comments on this video are going to be more honest than most conversations people have had out loud.